For almost your entire life, you've heard the same warning. The world has too many people. Too many mouths to feed, too many cars, too much pollution, too much pressure on the planet. The future, we were told, was overcrowded megacities, resource wars, and humanity multiplying out of control. But while everyone was distracted by AI, climate anxiety, and infinite doom scrolling, something historic quietly happened. For the first time in human history, humanity may have fallen below replacement level fertility globally. Not in one country, not in Europe, not just in rich nations, the entire planet. And if that sounds abstract, here's what it actually means. The human population machine has started slowing down. Not stopping tomorrow, not collapsing overnight, but the direction of history itself may have changed. And the craziest part? Most people still think the opposite is happening. So today, let's talk about the global baby bust, why it's happening, why almost every expert underestimated it, and why the next century could look completely different from the world we grew up expecting.
Chapter 1. The most important number you have never heard of. Before we get into collapsing birth rates and empty cities, we need one quick piece of Demographics 101. There's a number called the replacement rate. That number is roughly 2.1 children per woman. If a country averages 2.1 kids per woman over time, the population stays stable. Above it, population grows. Below it, eventually population shrinks. And right now, most of the world is below it. The United States is around 1.5. China is collapsing below replacement. South Korea is at levels so low, they almost sound fake. And this is where people get confused, because they look around and say, wait, if birth rates are collapsing, why is the world population still increasing? The answer is momentum. Imagine humanity as a gigantic oil tanker. Even after the engine slows down, the ship keeps moving forward for a long time, because there are still billions of adults alive. So, yes, the total population is still rising for now, but underneath the surface, the number of children being born is quietly shrinking, which means the future population pipeline is getting thinner every single year. And according to several projections, the world may begin long-term population decline around the middle of this century. That's an absolutely insane sentence when you remember that humans spent decades terrified of overpopulation. Which brings us to one of the biggest intellectual reversals of modern history.
Chapter 2. The population experts who got it all wrong. Back in the 1960s and 70s, overpopulation panic was everywhere. Books like The Population Bomb predicted mass starvation, societal collapse, and environmental catastrophe because humanity was supposedly reproducing too fast. And to be fair, at the time, population growth really was exploding. But there was one problem. A lot of people were looking at the wrong metric. They focused on total births and fast-growing populations, while many demographers were paying attention to fertility rates underneath the surface. And fertility rates were already beginning to fall. The problem is that population systems move slowly. Again, it's the oil tanker effect. Even after birth rates decline, populations can continue growing for decades because previous generations were so large. So the world kept getting more crowded, even while the long-term trend had already started changing direction. And now, the reversal is happening so fast that even major institutions are struggling to keep up. For example, the UN badly overestimated births in countries like South Korea, and South Korea has become the ultimate warning sign for the rest of the world. Because what's happening there no longer looks like a temporary dip. It looks like an entirely new civilization pattern.
Chapter 3. South Korea, China, and the no-kids era. South Korea's fertility rate is now so low
that demographers genuinely struggle to find historical comparisons. We are talking about levels where each generation becomes dramatically smaller than the previous one. And China, the country once terrified of overpopulation, is now facing a completely different crisis. One of the wildest statistics from recent years is this. In just over a decade, the percentage of young Chinese women saying they have no desire for children skyrocketed. Not fewer children, not maybe later. No children at all. That is a massive cultural shift. And this is why the fertility collapse isn't just about economics. It's psychological, cultural, civilizational. For most of human history, having children wasn't really a decision. It was just life. People had huge families, even when they were poor, crowded, and struggling. Now, parenthood has transformed into an active lifestyle choice. And once something becomes a choice, people start optimizing. They ask, can I afford this? Will this damage my career? Will I lose my freedom? Do I even want this life? And modern society gives people more alternatives to parenthood than at any point in human history, especially women, which leads directly into the biggest driver of all.
Chapter 4. Why is this happening everywhere at once? One of the strangest parts of the global fertility collapse is that it's happening across completely different cultures. Latin America, East Asia, Europe, North America. Even many developing countries are now seeing birth rates crash faster than experts predicted. So what changed? Well, several giant forces all hit at the same time. First, education. Modern economies created an educational arms race. A high school diploma used to be enough for stability. Now, people spend their 20s stacking degrees, internships, certifications, and career experience just to reach the middle class. That delays marriage, it delays family formation, and it dramatically raises the perceived cost of children. Second, urbanization. Kids made economic sense in agricultural societies. On a farm, more children could literally mean more labor. In modern cities, children are economically expensive for decades. Third, technology and social media. For the first time in history, cultural values spread globally in real time. TikTok doesn't just export dance trends, it exports expectations, lifestyle goals, consumer culture, relationship norms, ideas about freedom and identity. And finally, women gained unprecedented economic and personal autonomy, which is historically extraordinary. In service economies and knowledge economies, physical strength matters less. That opened the door for women to fully participate in education and high-income careers at scale. And once people have more control over their futures, fertility tends to fall. Not because people are irrational, but because modern life fundamentally changed the incentives around family. And nowhere demonstrates that transformation better than Latin America.
Chapter 5. The region nobody is talking about. When people imagine high fertility, they often picture developing nations rapidly growing forever. But some of the fastest fertility collapses are now happening in Latin America. Countries that once had very large families are now dropping below replacement rates incredibly quickly. Some major Latin American cities now have lower fertility than Tokyo. Think about how insane that is. Tokyo, the symbol of modern low birth rates, is no longer the outlier. It's becoming normal. And this completely changes global assumptions. For years, many wealthy nations assumed immigration from younger, developing countries would offset aging populations forever. But what happens when those countries stop having children too? That's when the conversation shifts from regional demographic decline to something much bigger, a potential global aging era. And that creates massive economic and political consequences.
Chapter 6. The Economic Time Bomb. Modern economies were basically designed around one assumption. Every generation would be larger than the previous one.
More workers, more consumers, more taxpayers, more growth. But what happens when the pyramid flips upside down? You suddenly get societies with huge elderly populations and shrinking numbers of young workers supporting them. That puts enormous pressure on healthcare systems, pensions, and social security programs. And governments basically face two options. Option one, immigration. Bring in younger workers from abroad to support the economy. But immigration can also trigger political backlash, cultural anxiety, and polarization. Option two, reduce benefits, which creates a different political explosion because older voters are often the most politically powerful group in society. And this creates what some economists describe as a demographic trap. Because in low-growth societies, politics becomes more zero-sum. Everyone starts fighting over a pie that is no longer expanding. But the long-term effects go beyond economics. They reach into everyday human life itself.
Chapter 7. The Weird Future of Shrinking Countries. Imagine an entire country slowly emptying out over generations. Schools closing, hospitals shutting down, neighborhoods aging, villages disappearing. Some demographers use Thailand as a thought experiment. If extremely low fertility persisted long enough, populations could shrink to levels that sound almost impossible today. And once decline starts, reversing it becomes incredibly difficult. Because fewer young people means fewer future parents, which means even fewer children in the next generation. That's why many governments are panicking. Countries have tried cash bonuses, tax incentives, subsidized childcare, free housing programs, and almost none of it has dramatically reversed fertility decline. Because this isn't just a money problem anymore. It's a meaning problem, a lifestyle problem, a social expectation problem. And ironically, the same technology making economies more productive may also deepen social isolation. Which brings us to AI.
Chapter 8. AI can replace the workers, but not the communities. Some techno-optimists believe AI and robotics will solve the demographic crisis. And economically, they might partially help. If machines can do more labor, societies may survive with fewer workers. But there's one thing AI probably cannot replace: human social fabric. A robot can increase GDP, but it cannot keep a small town alive. It cannot replace a local school closing down. It cannot recreate the feeling of a busy neighborhood, a packed cafe, or generations of families living in the same community. And this may become the strangest part of the entire demographic transition. For centuries, humanity feared scarcity caused by too many people. Now we may enter an era where some places fear emptiness caused by too few.
Conclusion. The Great Population Pivot. What makes this moment so fascinating is that we're living through a historic transition in real time, and most people barely notice it. Human civilization spent thousands of years expanding. More people, more cities, more growth. That expansion shaped our economies, politics, architecture, an entire idea of progress. But the rules may now be changing. Maybe humanity stabilizes and adapts beautifully. Maybe AI offsets the economic damage. Maybe smaller populations even improve quality of life and reduce pressure on the planet. Or maybe shrinking societies create economic stagnation, loneliness, political instability, and entire regions slowly fading away. Nobody really knows yet, because we've never seen this before. Not at a global scale. Not in recorded human history. And that's why the global baby bust might end up being one of the biggest stories of the 21st century, even though almost nobody is talking about it yet. If you enjoyed this video, hit like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what topic I should ruin your sleep with next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.